This one's for you, stats geeks. Gonna play a game with my Obelus Dumble and analyze those stats. Alrighty, let's talk some game. This is Dumble against Palana Glacier. So while looking at my opening hand, you saw you might have seen there were 3 cutleries. Cutlery is good, especially against Glacier, but you don't want them clogging up your opening hand because you typically can't use them till the mid game. Now my opponent left HQ wide open for me, and thank goodness I drew up before playing the laundry because dang, that snare would have killed me. Let's just say that snare was not friendship. Sure, I did manage to escape this unscathed, but came at a cost. I am now tagged, and I only have 1 card in hand, very vulnerable, but my opponent can't exploit this. Still, I'm quite sad to lose a David from my hand from the snare hit. Losing the David means 1 less run through a DNA tracker, and that's a very big deal, especially knowing my opponent's running 3 copies of it, almost certainly. It does get the paper clip in the bin though, and that must be something I keep in mind. Now, I spend the next turn just drawing up, clearing the tag because I want to play the daily cast, so nothing much to say there. Meanwhile, my opponent did fortify HQ, so I'm not able to get any more Obelus triggers. And at this point, my opponent is on 4 credits, so technically I should have been able to try running through R&D. In fact, that was probably what I should have done. Run through R&D when my opponent's poor, because they cannot punish me with any punishing phase checks. Once Palana is on 5 or more credits, that's when they can start doing nasty things, such as rezzing Komainus. At 4 or fewer credits, the only real eyes you have to worry about are Yagura and Aiki, both of which can potentially deal net damage and hit cards that you really want to keep. Now, my opponent plays a scarcity of resources, which I immediately combated with Employee Strike, and this is where Employee Strike starts ticking down and starts getting me mileage, blocking my opponent's ID ability from generating money. I do have Faust and David in hand, so I do want to try to get those out ASAP. So here I do a couple of draws, play the David, and get some liberated money. In the next turn, I think I'll be looking to get more liberated money and then play the Faust. On the same token, I'm trying to keep the Faust a surprise because I don't want my opponent to know that I can actually get through the remote no matter what. But, well, I need to empty cards from my hand, so the Faust goes. And I pass the turn over to my opponent, who then counters my current with the scarcity of resources once again. So this is quite annoying, because I'm starting to run low on money. I have a Liberator in hand that I want to play, but I can't, because scarcity makes it basically unplayable. There really is no point playing casts or Liberator accounts if there's a scarcity out on the floor. So instead I'm going to play Wanton Destruction. Woohoo! My opponent hasn't been scoring agendas, no Jackson users. There has to be agendas in hand, so I'm going through HQ, paper clipping through the vanilla, Daviding through the DNA tracker, and then hitting the Aiki. Aiki is 3 cards to break. I don't really want to ditch 3 cards here. I'd rather take the 2 net damage. All cards in my hand are equally useless. Nope. I decide to take the 3 cards because I do want to keep the spoon for the DNA tracker. So I let the Aiki subroutine fire, the draw card subroutine, the side game, and I fail. I bid a 0. And I managed to kill 3 cards from my opponent's hand. They do not play a Jackson on the next turn, so I am actually planning to run archives here, but then I realized, wait, Crick is a thing, and Crick is most likely on archives. I cannot let Crick fire, because I could very well hit a Jackson Howard. I could have hit a Jackson Howard with the Wanton, and if I let Crick fire on the Jackson Howard, it will undo all my efforts, so I definitely do not want that. I could play the Levy here and go for a run on archives, but given that my opponent is going full on Glacier, given a celebrity gift earlier, where he showed me his 4-2 agendas, it seems like it's really not a good idea to Levy right now, because I could run out of cards eventually. So instead, I'm going to place R&D pressure. I'm going to toss the medium out. If my opponent tries to score this agenda here, I can potentially freely get medium dicks, which gives me Obelus draws, and gets me accesses on R&D. So my opponent doesn't score the agenda just yet. They play the Jackson to neuter my Wanton Destruction. I then ask for reactions, because I might be running Rumor Mill. Of course I'm not. I only have Strike in my deck. But of course my opponent errs on the side of caution, using the Jackson Howard, indicating there are probably agendas in archives that I hit with Wanton Destruction. So I'm just going to draw here. I do find the employee strike that I need to use to counter the scarcity of resources, but obviously this is a bad time to play it. Obviously, my opponent's trying to score an agenda, so let's go for the agenda instead. Only costing 2 cards, I do steal the corporate sales team, which my opponent tried to sneak out when I was in a state where I couldn't contest the remote with too few cards. I was able to now contest the remote because my opponent delayed the scoring by 1 turn, and that's quite huge. Instead of getting 10 credits, my opponent instead loses 2 agenda points. My subsequent turn is spent regaining board state by ensuring that I have a full grip of cards in hand. Fun side note, by playing Inject, I actually bypass Palana's ability, because Inject doesn't actually draw cards, it adds cards to your hand. Doesn't matter either way, because Employee Strike is in play, Palana's not getting credits either way. And here I realized that it's a pup, not a crick, on Archives. Sometimes you just have to run that ice. I probably should have tried to run Archives and not fear the crick. So earlier on when I played the Wanton Destruction. But anyway, now it doesn't matter. I've done my retrieval run and I've retrieved my David. So that's quite important. Allows me to actually face check R&D without too much worry. My opponent places an upgrade on R&D as a reaction, and I'm a bit worried about that actually. This actually means that I have to respect Caprice, and that's a big problem. I can't be spending my whole David on R&D just to get hit by a Caprice. I have an awkward draw right here. I draw into a Temujin Contracts. I could slap the Temujin down somewhere, but it's pretty tough because I'm pretty poor right now. There's no good server to use Temujin on, not even Archives. And yeah, it's gonna show my cards. It reveals my cards. If I put it on HQ, he's gonna ice HQ, and same if I put it on R&D. So my best bet was not show it at all. Drop the fork instead, and play from there. Now I do draw into a medium, so now I finally decide to go for R&D. This is very dangerous. If the base upgrade is a Caprice, I'm kind of screwed. It's very difficult because if I fail the Caprice side game or the Betty side game for the matter, I get kicked out of the server, I don't get Temujin money, and I'm going to be very poor. That is quite bad news. So at this point, I'm just hoping that it's nothing too bad. I see a News Hound. Ooh, fancy splash indeed. Yes, my opponent is playing a bunch of scarcity of resources with News Hounds to fully leverage it, and that's a pretty good option actually for a Glacier deck. News Hound is such a cheap yet taxing sentry, and many decks don't have good solutions to it. Turns out it's not a Caprice, it's just a Cyberdex Viral Suite. I get Purge, which means nothing, but more importantly, I actually do draw 2 cards from the R&D run, even though I got Purge, because accessing the CVS from R&D counts as one of the cards that I access. So I actually get 2 draws from it, even though I access only 1 card with medium. So that's quite cool. Obelus actually did some draw there, and it fuels me so that I can actually contest this remote if I want to. But do I really want to? I know there's a Caprice at the back, and most likely I'm going to fail the side game, and yeah, it's not a very palatable server to run at this point. I'm going to try for it. I poke around the server, it's a Lotus Field. Okay, so it's going to cost me 4 cards to get through once. I can't get through twice. Looks like the best way is actually to spoon it. If I spoon the Lotus Field, it'll make the server a lot less good for scoring later on. So I'm going to spoon it, get rid of the outermost Lotus Field. I'm still going to have to pay 4 cards for this run, and I might get booted out of an unsuccessful side game, but at least subsequent scoring attempts will be much harder. It's also at this point that Paperclip is really paying off. The fact that I need to ditch 4 instead of 5 cards is quite a big deal right now. Those vanillas are just 1 credit taxes at this point, which is nearly nothing. That being said, I'm pretty poor, and I actually forced the Caprice Res here. I did not continue with the run. You notice I only paid 2 cards instead of 4. This is because after approaching the Lotus Field, he reses the Caprice, I decided to jack out. End the run, rather. Not jack out, end the run. This is because I was left with 1 credit. Continuing through the server just made no sense. So, yes. My opponent is down to 0 credits after scoring the Nisei Mark II. I can now go for the Caprice server and attempt to trash it. But no, instead I'm going for R&D. I need to start loading up those medium counters. And but first I need to click for a credit. So I take that back. I take a credit so that I can actually get through the pup. So click for credit. And then I'm going to run through. It'll cost me 3 cards plus 2 credits. Yeah, there's something wrong with that, right? Yep. I only actually needed to pay 2 cards because News Hound only has one subroutine. There's no current active. Newshound only has a tag subroutine. In fact, I could have taken tag. I really should have just taken the tag instead of losing cards here. If I actually noticed that, it would have helped my game so much more. So at this point, I'll make another misplay. Instead of trying to trash the Caprice, which I really should have, I instead decided to solidify my board state by playing the daily class. This is a big mistake. I really should be trashing, destroying the remote as soon as I can, at the soonest opportunity. And this is best done when your opponent is poor, when Palana's on 0 credits. I really should have exploited that destruction window to destroy his remote. Maybe spoon the Lotus Field, or at least kill the Caprice Nisei. I didn't do either. That was a big mistake. Where is the spoon coming from? Of course, the same old thing that is on the board. Same old spoon. So I did not do that, and as a direct result, my opponent actually gets to set up. Once again, I am setting myself up for a levy. So these are two very big turns which I could have used to contest that remote, and I did not. This is definitely by far the biggest misplay from my side this game. I was very intent on getting R&D money with Temujin and Obelus draws that I completely forgot about the remote. Completely tunnel vision, and by the time my opponent iced up that remote, I realized, whoops, it's too late to contest it. So instead, I'm just going to play the E-Strike, which allows me to levy without giving my opponent Palana money, and have the Employee Strike stay in play until they score the next agenda. I then run R&D with my new fully restocked hand, and I see a double pup. With only 3 credits, I need to break one pup subroutine with a card, and now that I've played the E-Strike, I actually do have to break the Newshound proper. That's going to cost me 3 cards. So this deck doesn't contain Wild Side, obviously. My draw is mostly event-based draw plus Obelus. So ditching the inject actually kind of hurt, but at the same token, I realized that I only had finite deck left, and I was only on 2 agenda points, so I did need to actually conserve the number of cards I ditched to archives as a result of, or rather ditched to my heat as a result of an unlucky inject. By playing inject, I'm milling myself unnecessarily. I might be drawing my cards faster, but I'm also milling myself out, which is bad. My opponent knows that at this point my main win conditions on R&D due to the way medium and Obelus work, so he's really protecting R&D with a 5-stack ice, a stack of 5 ice. So instead I go for the remote, trying to spoon it, and he immediately counters it with the Nisei Mark II. I attempt to go for the Caprice again. Because my opponent's only on 1 credit, they will have a very hard time defending that remote. So this is going to cost me 2 cards. I'm just going to drop 2 money cards right here. At this point, money doesn't really matter. What's getting through the remote is Faust. Faust is obviously the main breaker here. Caprice side game, it's either 0 or 1, 50% shot. Of course, I miss it. This is going to make my game really, really, really hard. I'm running out of deck, and I haven't been seeing the agendas, and my opponent has a semi-decent scoring server set up. They just need to drag the game out a bit more. E-Strike continues doing great work, but is it enough? I'm going to go for R&D once again. My opponent isn't really rich enough to res most of the stuff, can't res the outermost ice, so I'm just paying the same amount of money and cards to get through as usual. This time I get to see 3 cards off the top. Kumainu, Corporate Sales Team, Lotus Field. I wanted to see more agendas off that, but I'm pretty sure most of the agendas are in hand by now. Haven't seen a Jackson in ages, my opponent hasn't scored in ages, so where are the agendas? They're obviously in hand. How am I going to get to them? You guessed it. Wanton Destruction. Once more. If my opponent hasn't learned their lesson from now, it's that they really do need to protect HQ against this wizard. I do have the David, which has been sitting on the table for the longest time. My opponent didn't get to res a second DNA tracker against me, so that David has been sitting there, having been fetched by the retrieval run since ages ago. I'm gonna let Aiki fire this time because I really can't afford to spend 3 cards. Just gonna spend 2 on net damage because most of the cards in my hand are irrelevant, and then burn 3 cards from his hand. Now my opponent gets their turn. What do? Are they afraid of the cards that have just been milled? They try to draw. This indicates that there's at least an agenda in there. Try to draw again. Ice up archives. Okay, that's completely telegraphing the fact there's at least 1, if not 2 agendas in there. So the obvious move here is to draw 3 times, run archives, Newshound into pup. I can get through that for 3 cards and 2 credits. So I do so. Big question. $1 million question. Is it the game? Only one way to find out. It is global food and some other agenda. Whew. That was a lot of work. Now it's time for some critical discussion on the stats that we've collected this game. Employee Strike denied 9 credits throughout the entire game. That's an extra DNA tracker on R&D. You'll notice that my opponent never rezzed the third piece of ice on R&D, the middle ice of the 5-stack server. Well, that was a DNA tracker. Had I not had Employee Strike, my opponent would have been able to res that and make my life so much harder. I was never really in a position to spoon a DNA tracker, so I'm quite happy that the Employee Strike managed to actually suppress my opponent's economy. I know that I spent many clicks and credits to play the Employee Strike. I must have played it at least 3 or 4 times that game. But I think it's still worth it, because on top of that, it also removes scarcity of resources whenever I needed to, and that's huge. Never ever underestimate how unplayable resources become, economy resources, once scarcity hits the board. And it's not like I can easily steal agendas at my own whim to turn off scarcity of resources. So Employee Strike is a very easy solution to that, and it actually allowed me to win this game, in my opinion. Obelus, on the other hand, not so much. Sure, it drew 9 cards, which is pretty good considering that I only paid 4 credits for it. Even the Earthrise would only draw 6 cards for that. The problem is, it just feels so clunky because it doesn't really synergize very well with my deck outside of the medium. It's a complete normal with 1-turn destruction. Doesn't draw. It doesn't help me set up the 1-turn, unlike Earthrise or Wildside that will help me drop to 7 cards at the start of my turn so that I can perform a nice, good 1-turn destruction. Also, after the 1-turn, it doesn't draw me cards, so most of the time you realize I couldn't actually contest the archives very safely after the turn after the 1-turn, because even after a click to draw, click to draw, click to draw, and then run archives, if I hit a DNA tracker, I'm kind of doomed. So it is really not that good in this deck, but I still play it because I don't really have the influence from outside. So I need some other form of draw, and getting 9 cards from Obelus game proves that it is a pretty decent source of draw. Doesn't synergize with my deck, but there's not much I can actually do about it. So yeah, that's the stats in a nutshell. Think I could optimize this deck a bit more. The Obelus 1-turn synergy is really clunky. There's no synergy at all, for that matter. I need to rethink that, but otherwise, hopefully you see how effective Employee Strike or Obelus can be when they are used effectively. Thanks for watching and happy net running. I'll see you all.